would be a problem, but that's all right.
Good start.
Oh, Lordy.
I mean, we're live, right?
Yeah, we're live. We're rolling. Okay. We'll wait for some people to join the stream. And
I mean, I suppose you could go grab your water now if you need it.
I suppose I could just go chat here with three people on the thing.
Well, while I have everybody's undivided attention, I just want to shout out Jack Silverstein for learning that the Division II Best Player of the Year award is called the Harlan Hill Award, and I can't believe that Jack did not know that coming into tonight's festivities. But it's always good when a fellow history guy, can learn something. So Jack, shout out to expanding the knowledge. Harlan Hill, Chicago's finest. So that was cool to see, and one of my favorites. And nicknames, as we're going to get into with Bill here, with a certain punter for the Bears at some point, and talk about nicknames. But nicknames are fun to go through and find in history, and then try to roll them up and bring them up. And Harlan Hill, for as good of a player as he was, I can never find a reference to a nickname. And so when I was doing the championship belt series, I gave him the nickname the Harbinger of Thrill, which I think is a really fun writer nickname, but it's like way too long. Like it's not a nickname that I think that would ever stick, because it's way too long. But anyway, Harlan Hill, Harbinger of Thrill. It works as a written thing, and it's fun to say, but I don't think it's a real nickname that anybody would have ever picked up. Chris, I know, right? Like, how did Jack not know that? Like, of all the things that Jack knows and can like pull out of nowhere, how did he not know that the Division II Best Player trophy was called the Harlan Hill Trophy? I mean, Bill, you knew that.
What, the Harlan Hill is the Division II Heisman? Yeah.
Yeah, of course he knew, but like Jack somehow didn't. Like, he learned that tonight.
So Jack, our Jack
didn't know it.
Wow,
yeah, he didn't know it.
Yeah, that's
so
shocking.
Like so then I go on I try to Google it, because I thought that I would have assumed I would have made reference to it at some point, and so I literally referenced my name and Harlan Hill, and for some reason I found this quote. There was a gentleman that ranked the top 1,000 players. And it's on a website somewhere, and he quoted me, but not on Harlan Hill. He quoted me on saying, if you want to make people angry, rank something. And it just said, I mean, in a footnote, I'm like, I have said that, and I have written that, but I did not know that it was going to be referenced on another football site. So that was kind of fun.
That is funny. Yeah. And that's 100% true. I remember I ranked, I sent out a tweet, and I ranked the Bears head coaches since Lovie Smith, just the four. And people, you can't have Eberflus. It was just all right.
It's amazing. It never fails.
So, all right. Well, I think we can get this puppy going, because this was such an exhilarating game. So thank you all for joining us live, and we're going to get this then rolling in. Let's get the banner up. And we're coming down in 3, 2, 1. That's right. Bear down, Bears fans. It is time for Not Your Average Bears postgame show. Bill Zimmerman with you, and my co-host this week, after doing an admirable job earlier this week covering for me, is none other than at Gridiron Born himself, Jeff Berckes. You know him well. All over the Windy City Gridiron channel, and he joins me now. Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing great. It's Victory Thursday. I'm feeling good. This is the fourth time in 5 nights that I have been on the channel, on all of these different shows, talking to some of my favorite people about Bears football, and now we actually get a win to talk about. So that's fantastic.
Absolutely, and it was a fun, exhilarating game. It was just fantastic football from start to finish. And being that you are a Bears Over Beers host with EJ Snyder, and you guys bring on your favorite beverages. After watching quality football like that, I decided to run down and grab a beverage that would be fitting of watching that football game, and I will put it on the screen now.
That's beautiful.
A little Pepto-Bismol, because JB, I mean, look, the result is what, was ideal here. I know some of us want tank wins and all that, and some of us want the Bears to win, but today it worked out that the Bears winning was the best for both sides, those that want Bears victories and those that want draft status. So it worked out well. It was hideous. It was ugly, but hey, the win came down.
Well, this is one of those, I don't know what it is about writing betting columns, but my overall betting score on Tally Site, which, a bunch of us pick the games, I know you're part of this, and my Sunday's record is terrible lately. And I think it's probably because I've been traveling and I just haven't been paying as close attention to the league. But I sit down and I write specific articles for Thursday night games, and I'm kind of killing it. And I thought about this game and I thought, I'm definitely betting the under. And that cleared easily, right? Over under on this one, I think it was 40, and I got to 29, right? That was easy money. And then I thought, okay, I think the Bears are going to win this game, but I don't think they're going to cover. And I think I got it at 3.5 for the Panthers, and I think you got it at 4. Like this was exactly the game that I thought we were going to see. A lot of punts, sloppiness on both sides, particularly from the quarterback play, because neither guy has proven that they can string together good drives. So it's going to be a close, ugly game, and the Bears are going to pull it out. Exactly what happened.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly it. And my, I did bet this a little bit on DraftKings, and I thought this was all right. DJ Moore, we're just going to hammer all the overs for DJ Moore. All the overs hit, but they squeaked. It was 4.5 and 55. He was 5 and 58. The under was just a layup this week. But I did take the Bears to cover. I thought about teasing it down to 3 to at least get the push. I got it at 3.5, but oh well. But let's get into this. Let's talk about it a little bit. We can start with the quarterback play, and I don't think we're at a point anymore where we need to just break down Tyson Bagent and the pluses and the minuses and everything here. But because of the trade with Carolina, and of course, everything about this game that was intriguing, was just for people in Carolina and mostly in Chicago because of that trade, and not just the draft position and the pick in 2024, but Bryce Young, and the guy that in theory the Bears passed on. And of course, CJ Stroud could have been the selection if they decided to stay and take a quarterback, but Bryce Young was the pick there. And JB, this is my first observation about it, and it's really bad for the Panthers. And of course, if you say which quarterback has the bigger upside, of course, Bryce Young has a much higher ceiling than Tyson Bagent. And we're only a half a season into both these guys' careers. But right now, when you watch Bryce Young and you watch Tyson Bagent, they could have switched uniforms. They looked like the exact same quarterback. And when it's the number 1 pick versus a UDFA, yikes.
Yeah, that little bit from The Office where they say, "Hey, corporate sent over these pictures, and they want you to tell the difference between these two." And we could do that, and we could just show Young and Bagent, and they're the exact same thing. It looked like you could just swap them throughout the game, and they were basically doing the exact same thing. They were dirting balls, they were airmailing balls. There wasn't any consistency from either guy. They both made a couple plays. That was essentially what it was. But yeah, the stats are shockingly similar.
Really, they're almost identical. 21 of 38 for Bryce Young, 185 yards, no TDs, no picks. Passer rating, if we want to throw it out there, 68.4. And for Bagent, 20 of 33, slightly better completion percentage, less yards at 162. Same exact yards per attempt, 4.9, which is awful, and a 73 rating for Bagent. So it's way too early. And we've seen plenty of analysts and fans from other teams, just rain down on our parades, on our quarterbacks, whether that be Mitch Trubisky, whether that be Justin Fields, about, they're not going to pan out. And certainly halfway through Justin Fields' rookie season, everyone said how terrible Fields looked overall, and he wasn't putting it together. And we as Bears fans were sitting here going, look at, what's going on, and Matt Nagy's not helping him. And we looked at all the issues, and I guarantee you that's happening in Carolina. I mean, no DJ Shark tonight. That Adam Thielen can still catch the ball, but he just can't move. He's cooked. The Panthers offensive line isn't very good. There are a lot of things working against Bryce Young right now. But, when you just pull back and look at the big picture, he has a very long way to go to just kind of get to NFL average.
Yeah, and I think we really need to be sending thank you cards to David Tepper, who stepped in and said that this is my guy. I want Bryce Young. This is my team. I'm going to make the pick, even though his coaching staff seemed to want to favor CJ Stroud. And, I thought it was the strangest thing that the narrative changed moving up to the draft, because everybody had Stroud locked in at number 1, and then late it changed to Bryce Young. And so you see the success of Stroud. Now, again, that may not have translated if he went to Carolina. You don't have Slowick, the guy calling plays for the Texans. You don't have, I guess, the Texans' weapons. I mean, it seems weird to say that, but they do have some guys that are making plays. So it's not necessarily a 1-for-1. I mean, I'm looking at the stats right now, and like you say, Thielen had 10 targets, and that was pretty much the only thing he had going for him. He turns around and hands the ball off to Chuba Hubbard. I mean, like there's no real talent here. The only real talent on the Carolina offense is playing for Chicago now, right? Like, I mean, the Bears took him in return for that trade. So you can't write him off this early. He's clearly got a lot of talent, and he's got a lot of runway to be able to realize that talent. But right now, it seems like that choice of conflict, which Bears fans should know well, of a general manager taking a quarterback that the coaching staff wasn't aware of or wasn't in favor of, looks like it's going to benefit the Chicago Bears quite a bit, because that first pick looks like it's in contention for number 1 overall next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And whether it be number 1 or number 2, either way, an absolute, look, I have criticized Ryan Poles. There are plenty of things to criticize him for, but there are plenty of things that he has done well for this team as well. And I think if Ryan Poles is here 2 seasons, 3 seasons, or 10 seasons, it is going to be tough to beat what he was able to do with the number 1 pick in 2023 and what he was able to haul in. And of course, there are still picks to be made. Just the fact that if the Bears do take a new quarterback, and if they're in the first or second pick, they're absolutely going to take a new quarterback and move on from Justin Fields. The fact that they traded away the number 1 pick only to have the Panthers pick the following year, give them a quarterback prospect. And it doesn't matter if it's Williams or May. Both these guys are going to grade out as prospects better than Bryce Young going into the draft. So the fact that you get DJ Moore and these 2 second-round picks, and of course you turn the 9th pick into the 10th pick, and you get the 4th round pick, everything that Ryan Poles has done to date with this trade that he made is, if the Bears are successful, whether it's with Matt Eberflus, a new coach, a new general manager, everything, this trade is going to be the pivot point, the reason that the Bears were able to turn around their fortunes. So, I know when Ryan Pace left, everyone said, oh, well, he gave us Justin Fields going out the door, as a parting gift. And that, obviously at this point, that hasn't quite worked out like we had all hoped in 2021. But Ryan Poles, whether he's here or not, that trade is going to be so impactful for this team.
Yeah. I mean, when has that ever happened before? Right. Like, I mean, it's such a gamble. You talk, and again, there's a lot of football to be played. We don't know where that pick's going to end up, but it's such a gamble in its own right to say, okay, we've got our guy, we're going to build around him, and we're going to get a 1 next year. And Panther fans were coming at me, in the offseason saying, oh, we're making a playoff run. Right. And every fan is excited about their offseason and all that, but there were at least some people that were excited about what they were doing in Carolina. And so for Poles to pick that trade package, he would have had multiple options, and at least thinking, well, this might be a pretty high pick next year. He's got to be feeling pretty good about that.
Yeah, he absolutely does. And DJ Moore, while the game was not flashy, and I really wanted a big game for DJ. I'm sure he wanted one as well. I'm sure he wanted that 100 yards, get the touchdown, whatever it might be. But even with a modest game, like 558, I think is what the final numbers were, still continues to show. Like the one thing I keep saying about DJ Moore, everyone knew about his speed. Everyone knew he had good hands. He was obviously a quality receiver. No one was arguing that. What I keep going back to that I did not realize about him as a player is his ability. Like I knew he was a yak guy, but I thought it was because of his speed. I did not realize how good he was at breaking tackles, working through defenders, and just continue. And we saw it, Bajan gets it out on these little, 1 yard past the line of scrimmage, and Moore goes for 10, 12 yards, gets the first down. What he is able to do with the ball in his hands is so impressive to me.
Yeah, he's like a running back, and I think I remember talking to our friend DJ Snyder about one Mr. DJ Moore coming out, and that was his scouting report. Is like, this guy's he's like a running back that is a really good wide receiver, and so when he gets the ball in his hands, he knows how to get yards after catch. And if there was one thing that the Bears were lacking last year, it was a guy that could do just that. Right? I mean, it just seemed like maybe it was the routes that they were running, but there was very little, if any, yards after contact or yards after catch for the wide receivers for the Bears last year. So it's a refreshing thing to see a guy that has that ability and continues to do that. But like Tyson Bagent is not pushing the ball down the field, right? So the fact that DJ Moore had 5 for 58 is a reflection of how much of that was yak. I mean, it had to be 35 of the 58 yards or more, right? Like, and that's what he does. Even with Fields, most of his yards have been coming after the catch. So he's fantastic, and he is a legit number one. I was really excited when they got him. I saw him in that crazy game, like live in that crazy game against Atlanta last year. I don't know if you remember that, like crazy back and forth where he kind of like won it and then lost it, and then it's just this kind of insane.
That was PJ Walker was playing quarterback.
PJ Walker game, right? And Moore was just kind of on fire out of his mind. And I've watched him, a number of times over the years, and I think I was probably the most excited of anybody that I knew that DJ Moore was coming back in that trade, because I really like him, and it just gave the Bears something that was completely different than what they have had. And I was probably, over excited about Allen Robinson and his prospects to try to break Chicago Bears receiving records. I thought he was a really talented player, and then he just sort of got angry and quit and then kind of fell off a cliff. But if you're being honest with yourself, DJ Moore has a set of skills that I'm not sure I can remember the last time a Bears wide receiver would have anything like it, if ever. I think he's just a unique player, and he's still pretty young. And so he could absolutely set some Bears records here. Again, I don't want to get ahead of myself. This is his first year, but he's playing absolutely how I thought he could. And hopefully he's with this team for a long time.
Yeah, and with Justin, I am going to assume at this point that we're going to see Justin Fields next game against Detroit, being, we were, 51%, sure whether he was going to be playing or not. Oh, Matt Eberflus. But hopefully with Fields back and obviously being able to push the ball down the field more, we're going to see DJ's numbers jump again. And hopefully, that 1,500, I don't know the exact number that Brandon Marshall has for the single season receiving record. DJ was above that. I know he's dipped below it, but he's not far below it, even with these Bagent games and the 40, 50 yards a game he's been having these with Bagent. So I think that single season record is still in the cards for DJ Moore, and I think that would be a lot of fun if he was able to pull that out. Like, it's one of those things, we're not going to have a lot to watch and have fun and look forward to here the next 8 games. We could sit here and say, oh, we want to see all the rookies. You got to play Roshan a bunch. Let's get Tyler Scott out there a bunch. We want to see all the rookies develop and everything. That's not going to happen as much as we want, because Matt Eberflus is still going to want to win games to keep his job. So he is still going to play the veterans over the rookies a lot. And, so watching DJ Moore and seeing kind of what he can do is going to be fun, because like I said, there's just not going to be that much because of the veterans that I'm assuming Eberflus is going to continue to lean on as much as possible, especially when the losses start piling up. And, speaking of the veterans, let me ask you about this. Since we're talking offense, let's talk about the running game. And while it was not flashy today, it was effective. They ran the ball consistently, which is what they needed to do. I wanted to see them get back to the Raiders game plan. And today was a lot closer to that Raiders game plan, really trying to establish the run, try and keep Tyson in third and manageable as often as possible. And it worked pretty well. Obviously, they only managed 16 points because they eventually would shoot themselves in the foot a few times. But overall, the running game is effective. And Khalil Herbert, I'm sure, is going to be back next week. And if you want the Thunder and Lightning pairing that we thought Roschon was going to be with Herbert, right now, Deonta Foreman is the guy that has to continue to get the football.
Yeah, recently won the Scepter from Kyle Brandt, right? On Good Morning Football, like with the angry runs. And, Foreman's just a guy that seems to be overlooked frequently. He took over after the Panthers traded away Christian McCaffrey to the Niners last year and stepped in and had a fantastic end of the year, right? And he's an angry runner. He's a guy that can get a full head of steam. He's not anywhere close to the size of like Derrick Henry, but he's got a little bit of that in him, right? Where he gets a head of steam and he can run over some people.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's a Chicago running back. I mean, this is why I was so confused as to everyone pushing aside Khalil Herbert, who I think is a fantastic running back, and Foreman in favor of a rookie who we hadn't seen. Now I'm excited about Roschon Johnson. I think that he, can be a good player down the line, but the Bears really did have two good running backs and a good plan until Roschon kind of fell into their lap. And so there's no need to push Roschon up with these veterans that are present. And I think Khalil Herbert's probably on the track to be back, right? We saw that he was activated in the window. So,
Yep.
The next game or two, and he's got 10 days, just like Justin, to be able to get on the field next week. And so I think you'll see a return from Herbert here soon. And then with Foreman holding down the fort, and that only makes him better if he doesn't have to run 20 times. If he can kind of be that change-up back, I think that helps him as well. But I really like this running back room.
I loved it coming into it. And
I loved it
better than I thought. Yeah.
And then if this offensive line, which was good at running the football last year, let's not forget that they were good at running the football last year. And you see Darnell Wright playing next to Tevin Jenkins, like those two guys, can move some people off the ball. That's fun, right? It's like there could be some power run game that really develops an identity here. And again, you have to kind of keep that positive script going for either quarterback. That helps, and play action works, off of a strong running game too. Like there's some things that you can do as an offensive coordinator with a good run game. So I am excited to see if everything kind of comes back and you can see this original plan work, because I do think that the Bears could have an identity running the football, which sounds very Bears football to me.
Yeah. And before we kind of get to defense and we're going to talk some special teams, because there was absolutely special teams to discuss here. So we will get into it, but got to talk a little offensive line, and it's always tough to do too much offensive line unless there's some very glaring or obvious things, post game before you have a chance to really go back and watch the line play. And I thought overall what I saw from the offensive line was pretty good. I tend to my eyes drift more to the right side of the line because it's more fun to watch over there right now. I don't know. I assume when Nate Davis is back, and maybe Nate Davis comes back against Detroit, he's been out it's going to be about a month. That's usually about a high ankle sprain for an offensive lineman. Might be 5-6 weeks. But when Nate Davis comes back, Tevin and Darnell Wright are so good together on the right side of the line. But Nate Davis has literally played. I don't know what Nate Davis played in high school. I'd love to find out, because he has played right guard since he showed up at Charlotte, the college he went to, and basically has been there exclusively. So I assume Tev's going to move back to the left side, and it's not like that's going to be terrible with Braxton Jones. We know that Braxton can move guys in the run game as well. But watching Tevin and watching Darnell together on the right side is a lot of fun. And I did see a couple mistakes from Tevin, but Darnell Wright was really moving people today. Like, it's not like he doesn't usually do that, but that was the one thing that stood out to me, just kind of that first glance offensive line watching. It really felt like Darnell Wright had himself a game.
I completely agree, and I think Tevin had his hands full. I mean that's a really good player. Brown
Absolutely.
for the Panthers probably. Well, with Burns out, he was certainly the best player on the Panthers defense without question. But he's one of the better players in the league. So, he had his hands full, and that showed at times. But I thought overall the pass pro has been pretty good for this
Sure.
offensive line lately, right? And I think Braxton Jones had some issues in his pass pro last year, but he was very good in the run game. And if I broke down a couple games for Braxton, and the amount of help that they were giving him was actually pretty high, but not from a chip standpoint. There's a little bit of that, but it was a lot of scheme where they would roll away from Braxton. They would give him very easy assignments. He didn't have to do a lot of work. And now I think that they're putting a little bit more on everybody. They're not necessarily favored because they got a rookie on the right side, right? And then they got Braxton on the left, so they can't really favor one side or the other in terms of giving help. And so I think you are seeing these guys have to stand up on their own, and I think they're doing it. And I think it's more impressive for Wright because he's a rookie, but it's still impressive for Jones because he was a fifth rounder last year, right? So if these guys really are the future at tackle, and you have Nate Davis is a good football player, right? Like all the stuff that happened in the preseason, let's not worry about that. He's a good football player. Tevin looks like he could be a killer. I mean, like if he can stay on the field, this dude loves to bury people, right?
He sure does.
Now you got 4 offensive linemen that you think you could probably play with, right? And you just add this center that I've only been begging for 4 years, and this thing could start to sing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So assuming Justin Fields is back, and look, we know what's going to happen when we go from Bagent to Fields. Justin's going to hold on to the ball longer. He's going to look for plays down the field, and the opponents, we're going to see Detroit here, a couple times in the next 3 weeks. Aiden Hutchinson's there. Yeah, like there's some better talent that this offensive line is going to have to face. Brown's a good player, but when you're playing this Carolina front without Brian Burns, it's certainly a manageable task for an offensive line. So we're going to see Justin Fields, who's going to need more time to throw. We're going to see some better opponents out there. And if Nate Davis is back, especially, and we have 4, all 5 starters, Cody Whitehair not going to be the center. I assume it's going to be Lucas Patrick, and I assume that the Bears will know that Cody Whitehair, it's going to be the tough conversation. Cody, you're going to have to go to the bench kind of a thing. But that offensive line, I really would like to see. I know Justin holds on to the ball too long. I know it's a problem. But if he can have a little more time to throw, I really would like to see what happens with him the second half of this season. And if this offensive line can stay healthy, and that's the thing, we know how important it is for an offensive line to play together. Braxton Jones has missed time. Tevin Jenkins missed the beginning of the year. Like, we haven't really seen this, now Nate Davis is out. We haven't seen this offensive line really play together at all. If they can all get back on the field and play and stay on the field, they are going to continue to improve. And if you give Justin a little more time to throw, I do really wonder if this offense, especially if Luke Getsy does a few things to help Justin out and not try and run this offense, next week against Detroit, the offense might be able to hum a little bit.
I mean, they've had 7 different starting offensive line combinations in 10 games, right? And then if Nate Davis comes back, that's going to be the 8th because you're going to bounce Tevin back over, and whoever you start at center, even if it's Whitehair, if it's Patrick, that's a new starting combination. The plan coming into the year was Whitehair at center, right? So again, like, you have a lot of different combinations that have played together, and it's hard to do that. You have to learn the guy next to you. And, when you're combo blocking, right, how okay, he's got that block. I can slide off and I can go to the next level. That takes time. It takes reps. And, these good offensive lines across the league, generally they have been playing together for a long time. Like the Eagles offensive line, right? Like, they play together for a long time. They know what they're doing. They know how to pass off blocks. They communicate well. And if you're constantly flipping guys from one side to the other, or, another guy's hurt and you got a backup in, you just don't have that continuity. And so I'm excited just from a pure football nerd, offensive nerd, line nerd, standpoint, just to see what it looks like, because you could kind of talk yourself, besides the Whitehair thing, because I think we all worried about that. And we really like Cody. We all like Cody, right? Like, he's been a good football player for this team, but those injuries have really cost him a lot of his athleticism. And so other than the center position and Cody Whitehair at center position, I think a lot of us were pretty excited about what this line could look like coming into the year. And so it would just be nice if we could see that plan and see if Ryan Poles and what his plan was actually looks good on the field.
100%. So this is Not Your Average Bears post-game show. Bill Zimmerman and Jeff Berckes, we are with you as we discuss the Bears 16-13 win. For those of you listening or watching live, make sure you drop comments, questions in the comments section. We will get to them here in a little bit. But I want to take a quick break for those on the podcast side, and we will be back here momentarily on Not Your Average Bears post-game show. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back in to Not Your Average Bears postgame show. Bill Zimmerman and Jeff Berckes with you. Jeff, let's switch over to the defensive side of the ball. I do want to get to special teams, but let's do the defensive side of the ball first. Let's talk about this defensive line because I think it's worth talking about Montez Sweat. And while Sweat didn't have some big game with tackles for a loss or 2-3 sacks, he did in an essence that he was creating pressure. And he was creating pressure regularly, which we saw when you have someone, and this was supposed to be Yannick Ngakwe's job, right? Ngakoue was supposed to be the guy that was going to start creating the pressure. That's why they signed him, and that was going to help the entire defensive line. He hasn't been able to do that this year. They bring in Sweat. That first game, he did have, he affected one play. I think he had one or two pressures, affected a pass with Derek Carr. Didn't do too much, but he'd been here for 3 days, give him a break. But he's been here for a week, a week and 8 days, 9 days, whatever it is, gets, a little comfortable. And he had regular pressures. I think 5 or 6 pressures in this game alone. Like I said, didn't get home for sacks, but he was affecting plays and forcing Bryce Young to move. He moved into a couple sacks because of the pressure that Sweat created. So if Sweat is able to do this, and again, he's going to have, better offensive lines than Carolina and things like that. So, you have to keep in mind the opponent. And it's arguable that the 2 worst teams in the NFL played tonight. It's, Carolina is definitely one of them. If you want to say Arizona's worse than the Bears, but fine. I'm not trying to rain on our parade, but this is a bad football team. But if Montez Sweat can keep this up, he may be able to elevate some of the other guys up front here. And maybe, just maybe, the Bears can create a little pressure on these quarterbacks the second half of the season and have a much more functional pass defense, hopefully.
I mean, they had 10 sacks coming into this game.
And 5 of them were Washington.
And 5 of them were against Sam Howell, who, takes, I think, 5 sacks a game, right? So it is kind of fascinating to see how much of an impact he had. I mean, I'm looking at the stat sheet. I don't think he recorded a tackle. Like, he's not on my stat sheet. And so I don't think he recorded like a traditional stat, but like you said, he had at least 5 pressures, right? So, and this is a guy who's going to be great against the run. We know that he can stop the run. Montez Sweat speaking. And so if you add a number 1, like I talked about this with Lester quite a bit, you add a number 1, that means that the number 2, who was trying to step into a number 1 role, doesn't have to be that dude. He can be the complementary piece, and that provides better matchups, or they're not, rolling the pocket away from him, right? Like, part of Yannick Ngakwe's issues this year is that he's the one guy that they're game planning for. And I get it. He's not winning a ton of one-on-ones either, but like, you can tell in their game plans that they at least acknowledge that Yannick Ngakoue can get them. And so he's getting at least a little bit of additional attention. But you put a competent person on the other side, as opposed to someone like Dominique Robinson. And now you can't necessarily do that. You're going to have to put that extra attention on Sweat, or you're going to have to, take your chances. And so everybody just kind of goes down a notch. The same thing with like DJ Moore. You add a number 1 wide receiver, everybody feels a little bit more comfortable down in their number 2 or number 3 role, right? And so I love it from that perspective. I don't think Montez Sweat is like some top tier, defensive player of the year candidate dog or anything like that. Like, that's not who he is, but he is a really good football player. And he's someone that it's such a gap in what the Bears had before that trade, that he absolutely will. I mean, again, bad football team, but 3 sacks for a team that couldn't get basically any pressure at all coming into this game is because I think, like you said, he had that assist for the green sack. The green sack is not anything that was that impressive on Green's part. He made Bryce Young step up, and Green kind of, hugged him down to the ground. Now he's got to be there. He's got to make the play. But if there were ever an opportunity to give an assist, a sack assist, that's exactly what you're talking about. Is causing the pressure and having a guy run into another guy.
Yeah, and you are correct. Yeah, no tackles, no assists on tackles, nothing from Sweat. 3 quarterback hits though. Got the, which is, again, the Bears had 4 quarterback hits total the last 2 games combined, and 3 of them came from TJ Edwards. So the defensive line had one, I think it was Justin Jones, had 1 quarterback hit the last 2 games. They get 9 quarterback hits today. That's obviously a lot better what you need to see. And Justin Jones also had 3 quarterback hits and, had the sack. His presence was felt. That was nice to see. I know he's not a building block. He's not going to be here next year. I would almost certainly think that's the case. But it was good to see him contributing because he's been pretty quiet this whole off season. But let's get to the back 7 here, because there's a couple things I want to get to. The one thing that I want to ask you about is Jaquan Brisker, because he's an interesting guy. I know a lot of Bears fans are big Brisker fans, and he makes like an impact play, tackle for loss, whatever it might be. He's a good blitzer. He makes an impact play almost every game, but he also has a lot of mistakes there. He had a couple bad missed tackles that resulted in first downs. Like I said, I know he had a tackle for loss. He made his impact, some positive plays, but there's still a lot of negative plays, a lot of inconsistencies with Jaquan Brisker. We're halfway through year 2, especially a 2nd-round pick from a safety. I'm at a point like Tyreek Stevenson. He's a rookie cornerback. I'm patient. Kyler Gordon continues. There's improving there. And playing really well. There's a lot to like in the secondary. But at safety, we know Eddie Jackson is, it seems the career feels like it's kind of winding down. I don't know if he's going to bounce around the league here, probably his last year, but you need more out of Brisker. He really needs to stabilize that safety in the middle of that secondary. And I'm not seeing enough at this point.
I think you said the right word there for me, which was stabilize. And it feels like Kyler Gordon has been doing this. Like he's been on an upward trajectory. I mean, he had a game. I mean, Gordon, fantastic all over the place,
everywhere. Yep.
And that's fantastic to see. And he's an athletic freak, and so that's really great. But he started off pretty rough. I think they put too much on his plate. They were asking him to to play outside and inside, right? And there's all this, but I think he has steadily improved. He's had to fight some injuries as well, which is also unfortunate. Brisker has felt like a roller coaster, right? Like to me, he some games like, Brisker played really well. Great to see. Maybe he's going to be the guy. And then the next day, he's like, man, he made like 7 mistakes, and so it feels very vacillating to me, and that makes me feel uncomfortable because the safety should bring some level of consistency, because they're the safety, right? They're the last line of defense. And so, I'm reminded of like Adrian Amos, who famously PFF loved, right? That he always had like the highest PFF scores, and Bears fans are like, well, why? Like he doesn't really make a lot of plays. And he's not making
screw up,
but that's it, right? That's why he got such great scores from PFF, was because he was always in the right position. He didn't screw up. He made the plays, and so he provided this level of stability. Whereas Eddie Jackson, maybe he missed a couple of tackles here and there. Okay, yes, he certainly missed a couple of tackles here and there, but he'd make those plays. He'd get the pick 6, right? He was more of the gambler. And so part of me is wondering, like, is Brisker trying to be like what Eddie Jackson was, and they need a more steady presence next to Brisker? But I have been expecting Brisker to be the steady presence, right? So what is he going to be? Is he going to settle into being a more consistent contributor on this defense, or is he going to try to make some plays? Now he needs to make more plays if he's going to be that dude, but like it just feels like he hasn't picked the lane yet, and then the Bears don't have the right person next to him.
Yeah, to me, and I understand different schemes, but it just felt to me like the Brisker pick was that Brisker was going to be the Adrian Amos to let Eddie
Right.
Jackson go back to what he was doing under the Fangio defense. Because once that secondary kind of declined, everyone thought Eddie Jackson kind of, hit the bricks and wasn't playing up to par. The problem was that Eddie Jackson had to completely change his role. And as far as I could tell, the role he was playing the last few years, he was doing a pretty good job overall, but he couldn't do that role he truly excelled in. And I kind of thought Brisker be able to play that Amos role, and they could unleash Jackson more into that previous role. And I think at this point, and Eddie has the foot issue, and it's just, I think age is catching up to him. He doesn't have that same game-breaking ability that he once did. But now we're at a point where Jackson's declining and Brisker's not, improving enough. And the safety room isn't great right now. And obviously Brisker's going to be the starter here for the next few years. He's at least going to be the starter through I can't see them trying to make a change there. I think they're going to have to make a change at the other safety spot next year. But, the cornerbacks are great, right? With Jalen and hopefully he remains here and Stevenson, again, rookie, inconsistent. That's okay. But Gordon had a huge game. Greg Stroman was useful. Blackwell, was good last year. We haven't seen him too much yet this year because of the injury. The cornerback talent, Ryan Poles and who's ever assessing corners is doing a good job keeping that room steady and deep and plenty of talent. We need to see it at safety though. And kind of speaking of roster construction, I want to talk linebackers. I talked about this a little bit. I know you've talked about it a little bit on your podcast. I want to bring it up again because it's frustrating to me knowing I was not a fan of the Tremaine Edmonds signing when it happened. Nothing against him as a player. He's a good football player. I don't like spending a lot of money at linebacker. Not that Jack Sanborn had a huge game today, but he was solid. He was pretty steady. Almost had that interception. You got to grab that, Jack. But, played a pretty solid game. And I sit here and go and TJ Edwards was great. But with Edwards and Edmonds, and knowing that this defense can still function at the same level with Jack Sanborn, I sit there and go, if you had your base linebackers of Edwards, Sanborn, and Noah Sewell, who, while he doesn't get a lot of reps, he's been playing Sam a little bit here the last couple of weeks. I haven't seen him screw up. He seems to be doing okay out there in the few snaps he's getting. That freeing up $18 million to do something else with and having basically the same productivity at linebacker is frustrating, not just for this season, but you've got multiple year contracts with Edwards and Edmonds, which means Jack Sanborn and Noah Sewell are basically going to be buried as the Sam or backups or whatever they're going to be for the length of their rookie contracts. Like, this isn't changing. This is what they've done. These are the linebackers they have. So not only is it frustrating that you have a guy like Sanborn that you saw last season and saw, this might be something. Maybe we can roll with him at Mike. Now, not only have you buried him for this season as a backup or the Sam in base, which we know doesn't happen that or 20, 30%, whatever it is, but this is what it is moving forward. You've got him stuck in the second string. I call it second string because I just don't think of the Sam enough as a starter. So you got him just buried at second string and you've got $18 million in front of him. I'm just frustrated with what they did there.
And it's his guy. That's what kills me.
Yeah, it's not a pace guy.
Brought him in.
It's a Poles guy. Yeah,
it wasn't a pace guy. This was a Poles guy. So like it's not hindsight when you question the move as it happens, right? And we're still trying to figure out this general manager and understand what he prioritizes and how he's doing business. And the Roquan situation, it breaks down. He's clearly frustrated with him, so he ships him off, right? And you say, okay, like that's a really good football player. They were playing him out of position anyway. They changed the defense. They're trading him to a spot that he's going to excel in. And by the way, he is excelling there, right? And so great for Roquan. Roquan wins in that. And then what can the Bears do with that extra capital, right? And so they free up that money and then they just plow it right back into the same position for a lesser player. Well, wait, that doesn't make sense. Like we questioned that at the time. It doesn't make a lot of sense. You knew what you had, or I would think that you knew what you had. So why didn't you feel comfortable going forward with Sanborn as the starter? Was it an injury issue? Was it like you just saw a ceiling and you just didn't think that he could operate this defense? But to me, like that was the perfect encapsulation of what having a defensive head coach and someone who's scouting for those traits should give you, which is I can find talent like this and plug them in my defense and make it work. Not I have to go out and sign the highest paid player at this position to make my defense work. And so it is a misallocation of resources. And people are going to say, hey, they had the most cap room. They had to spend it somewhere. Like, they're going to just kind of like, talk it away. But eventually this stuff catches up to you, right? We would do the same thing with Pace. When he came in here, he made some decisions and, oh, he's got money. Who cares? Who cares that he signed Mike Glennon for all this crazy money? Like he's got the cash. It was a smokescreen. So people didn't know that they were taking a quarterback, right? And all those dumb decisions that Pace made stacked up and then they buried him, right? And so right now, Poles doesn't have a ton of those to bury him with, but if he keeps doing it, then those are the things that you look back on and say, well, look at all of those decisions that he made, and then he trapped himself into a corner.
Yeah, and we'll see how this kind of plays out here moving forward. But again, that's a lot. 25 million basically a year is a lot to be tied up at linebacker when you're going to have to pay Jalen. You're going to have some free agent acquisitions on the defensive line, and if you allocate too many resources on the defense and spend too much there, you're in the Ryan Pace situation where you don't have anything left on the offense, and suddenly you're, grabbing Jimmy Graham or anything you can find to try and get, red zone presence and stuff. So we'll see how this develops here moving forward, because after this this next off season, the fun shouldn't be as prolific, and they may have to make some tougher choices. So we'll see here. But before we wrap up and get to questions here, got to talk special teams. JB and I had been talking about this going into this, that, we're going to have to talk about Trenton Gill. And look, let me just say this before we get into this. I don't hate Trenton Gill. I just think Trenton Gill is meh. Like, I just, he's fine. He's a punter. There are lots of punters better than him. There are punters that are worse than him. And I know, look, the guillotine is a great nickname. It's up there on Pro Football Reference now. Well done. But I think we can pretty much say that Trenton Gill today probably had the worst game of his career.
He might have had the best punt of his career and then the worst game overall, which kind of goes to show you what that was, right? Like he boomed one that was fantastic. He had another one that I think better coverage might have downed it, pretty far down, but it just bounced into the end zone. So that's a bad punt. And then he had the shank. Right. And then of course the punt return for a touchdown, which we went back and forth on. Like, I probably need to see it again. And you said you might have an analysis from an expert, but that seemed to me like a punt that should have been covered. I don't think he outkicked his coverage there. But to me, the bad one was the shank. And then, he had the touchback, which I thought those are unacceptable. Touchbacks you just want to avoid as much as possible. That's a negative punt for the most part, unless you just absolutely somehow flipped the field and rolled it all the way down. But for the most part, anytime it goes into the end zone, that's a bad punt. Obviously, a punt return for a touchdown is bad, but I guess I would want to know your perspective on if that was Gill's fault or if that was coverage or a combination of the two.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I am a special teams expert, and that's why I had Patrick Manley on Bears Banter earlier, and I will say this: if you want to hear some really good special teams analysis, if you go to my Twitter feed at Bill T. Zimmerman, I retweeted it right after the punt return touchdown. And put it back out there and said, here's Patrick Manley. So if you want to check it out, it's just like a 2-minute video clip. It's just a really good analysis. He kind of went through everything in those 2 minutes. And to me, like, the special teams hadn't jumped off the page or hadn't been a big negative. It had just been there, which for the most part is okay as far as that's what I thought. So I asked Patrick Manley, like, how's the special teams? And he basically, it's terrible. And the first thing he started with is their punt return coverage is awful. They give up a lot of long punt returns, and he kind of went into it there. And I actually texted him tonight after that punt return. I'm like, hey, 2 days ago you had it nailed, and he was just like, basically like, yeah, I'm unfortunately correct on that one. But so since I had him on text on that, I said, well, I'm doing the postgame show. I'm doing it with JB. I know we're going to be talking about this. Let me get the expert's opinion. So I said, was that bad coverage, or did Gill, all right, so I just say what I asked him. Did Gill outkick the coverage on that punt return? Was it poor coverage, or was it just missed tackles? What was the main issue? Here's Patrick Manley's response. All of the above. He was a little backed up on the 22, so they probably asked him to bang it. Still needed more loft on the kick. Right side over pursued on a left return. Left side never got to the middle of the field. He saw a hole and took it. Gunner and Scales missed bad tackles. And of course, I just responded with 6. Yeah, I saw that with Scales. 65 would have never. And he just laughed and gave me a thumbs up. So, so there it is with Patrick Manley. And again, that's why I like talking to Patrick, because he knows this stuff so well. I feel like he could be a special teams coordinator if he wanted to be. So he's putting a little of it on Gill, but it does feel like he's putting more of it on the coverage. The coverage wasn't where it was supposed to be, and even the guys that were in the positions they needed to be missed tackles.
Okay, so that's what I saw. I mean, it was a good punt, like you said. He banged it. Gill doesn't have the biggest leg in the league. I think we can, we all know that, right? Like I'm certainly not going to pretend like he does. But for the punt return, I thought it was a little bit more coverage. I think overall, and I liked that you said that you don't hate him and that you think he's more meh, because part of our back and forth, my problem was that there was a little bit of like, he sucks. And I think like, well, I sort of see him more as an average, but he, hopefully he can improve. And then the only thing that I don't know, and I, maybe this mixes with what Manley was saying, but is he being coached to try to hit the 10-yard line or the 8-yard line, or is he being coached to try to bury it inside the 5 when he has that opportunity to pin a little deeper? Because I know we've gone back and forth about, why isn't he getting it inside the 5? Why aren't we seeing a little bit more of that? And it seems like he's so accurate at just hitting it to the 8 or to the 9, right? Like, it just seems like he's really good about hitting that. So is that the coaching point? Are they trying to aim him at the 8 or the 10 or whatever it is, just so that he's not getting a touchback? Or is he being coached like, no, go for it. Hit it inside the 5 if you can, and he's just missing a spot. I would love to know that, because it feels like more of a conservative coaching point, because I think that the fact he doesn't have the leg to boom a 70-yarder, but he does seem to have an accurate leg. He just may not be being asked to do that as much.
Yeah, and here's where I am with punting, and I'll bring up one more thing with Gill, and I get it, it's punting. Like it's the field goal kicking at least is putting points on the board. Punting is the least interesting thing for most fans, but we're also at a point where there are so many advanced statistics about so many things, and not just EPA and things like that. I'm just talking about statistics that 25 years ago nobody talked about, and you're seeing it more and more, and there's just so much more to punting. Like if you went in the newspaper, like this is, I'm using that as to talk about how far back, and you went in 1991, and if you're old enough and listening to this podcast and you remember actual newspapers where you went to, they called it like the scorecard or the scoreboard part of the sports section, and there were all the box scores, and they sometimes put statistical leaders in there and everything. And if you saw the punting statistical leaders, it was like the number of punts, the yard average, the net average, inside the 20, and touchdowns allowed. And if you go and look at the punt statistics 30 years later, nothing's changed. It's what they put. And I think there are so many things that you could put in there for punting, like what I was talking about with you and a couple other people about opportunities to pin. Like if you're punting at midfield, you really have a chance to put them back at the 5-yard line. Did you do that? There's a big difference of punting, on the opponent's 46 versus your own 38. It's a big difference there. When you had an opportunity to truly pin, did you do it? When you needed to flip the field, were you able to do it? Did you, if you're punting from, if you're within your own 30, did you get the opponent within their own 30? Did you flip it back over to the other side? There's a lot of nuance to punting that I think we, and I actually talked to Brad Spielberger about this. He goes, "Oh, we track everything. We have all this kind of stuff." And I'm like, Yeah, but you don't put it out there. You hoard that for yourself and for the teams that I'm like, put some of this out there. Put something interesting out there about punts so we have some way other than punter grades to really look at this thing, because that's the one thing. And it's just a hunch. And Patrick Manley did agree with me on that. So I felt pretty good about it, because I don't know what I'm watching with punters. I'm not a punting expert, but that when Trenton Gill, when I just brought this up, has an opportunity to pin, and you said, maybe it's coaching. Maybe they'd much rather have him at the 15, 14-yard line, 13-yard line than try and get him, inside the 5 and pin him at the 3 and risk a touchback. I think that's worth it, because as a former offensive lineman, I remember when you're in the huddle in your own end zone, you almost feel like you're just like, all right, let's just get a first down or 2 and get the hell out of here. Like, you're not even thinking scoring points. And if you're at your own 17, even though it's an extra 12 yards, it's a totally different mindset. At least it was for me. So that's my thing with Trenton Gill, is I just never see that able to pin it deep. And I asked Patrick Manley, is that more of a coverage thing? He goes, that's become a skilled kick where, you put a certain rotation on the ball, so when it hits the ground, it bounces straight up. That's the, coffin corner and the things that they used to do. That's not the thing anymore. That's the skill, is that type of punt. And it doesn't seem like that's in Gill's bag, or maybe he's not being asked to do it. I'm not sure. But that's where I always was with Gill. Is my big thing with punters that I look for is I want them to be able to pin an offense deep once or twice a game, because that's how you impact a game to me as a punter. And I just haven't seen it with Gill. So that was my knock on him. I'm not trying to say he's the worst punter in the league. I'd say he's probably below average, somewhere in the 20 to 24 range. I don't know, because I don't know enough about punters. But I'm not sitting here saying we need to get him off the team. But, that's just kind of my overall thought. And today, with the shank and everything, special teams was big. And we'll wrap up after talking Gill here about Frank Reich's decision at the end of the game. I just want to see more out of Gill. And that's it. The Bears have 57 problems, and Trenton Gill is number 56 on there. It's not a big deal, but that's my point.
Well, let me say that I do think it can be done statistically. And what I was trying to do last year, which I did about halfway through the year, was I had a study that I had found that took all the punts and it graphed them of where they were at on the field, what the expected net was, what the expected return yards was, what the expected, just raw punting yardage was. And it gave an average. And I calculated based on the zones of the field what the expectations would be. And then I mapped his specific punts. And then I said yards under or above expectation. So it was about midway through the year, and he was actually doing quite well. And so again, I'm about a year behind. I haven't gone back and done that. And the data was from a couple years ago. It's not super old, but it's a few years ago, right? And now over the last couple of years, you've had this influx of Aussie punters and some of these guys that have just amazing legs that can flip the field. And I think that those numbers probably need to be updated, right? The data set needs to be updated because you have better punting over the last few years. So I think it can be done. I think it can be done in a very statistically defensible way. And I think it can be done where you tie it to where the drive starts and the expected points of where that drive starts. And you can go off an average, and you can say this is, above expectation, below expectation. Like, we can do some statistical things that are defensible and would allow us to compare apples to apples. But it takes some time. And like you said with PFF and our friend Brad Spielberger, the part that frustrates me with data is that it needs to be publicly available. I don't need black box BS. Please, just give me information that somebody else can replicate my methods. That's what we need. We need more publicly available information. Don't keep it behind closed doors. We can do some cool stuff with it. Just open it up.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, even if you don't want to put everything out there for whatever the reason, because you want to have some sort of exclusivity, because I'm sure whatever they charge professional teams and collegiate teams that buy their analytics, there's a lot more there, and it's a lot more expensive than whatever someone pays for advanced stats from PFF. So I get it. I get the business plan, but if you look at their punting, there's basically nothing there. It's the same. It's like I said, it's the same thing you get in the 1992, sports page. So before we get to comments, I think the one thing that I think we have to talk about that we haven't is Frank Reich's decision at the end of the game. And I understand that Eddie Pinheiro is supposed to have a big leg, but whatever was going on there, I know the idea is when the field goal kicker is warming up at the beginning of the game, the special teams coordinator watches it, talks to the kicker, and goes, all right, what's your max distance going this direction, and what's your max distance going that direction? There is no way that Eddie Pinheiro's max was 60 yards going that direction. I mean, that was a 59-yard attempt. It was probably 10 yards short. Like, it landed in the middle of the end zone, maybe even the front part of the end. Like, it was not even close. And if you watch Eddie Pinheiro's reaction, on the TV there, he just kind of he looked at the sideline and shrugged, like, yeah, I that wasn't going to happen. So I get it that the Panthers had what was it, a 15-play drive to get the 50 yards they did, whatever it was, because like literally they cannot get chunk plays. We used to talk about it with Andy Dalton and Mitch Trubisky and everything about how you need explosive plays. The Panthers don't have an ability for explosive plays. They have to play like the Bears do with Tyson Bagent. And it was, I'm just looking at 15 plays, 50 yards. That's all they mustered. So I'm assuming Frank Reich looked at it and goes, there is a 0% chance that we're going to get a first down on 4th and 10, but maybe a 1% chance that Eddie Pinheiro is going to kick the game-tying field goal. It was a terrible decision. I don't know what Frank Reich was thinking. You have to at least give your number one pick, the overall number one pick, you have to pull him aside, put your arm around him, and say, Bryce, go get us a first down.
I laughed. When they lined up at the field goal, I just started laughing. Like, well, this thing's over. Like, I mean, it was an unbelievable decision, because we know what Eddie Pinheiro is, and he's made himself into a kicker that's going to stay on rosters for a while. Don't get me wrong. Like, he belongs. He deserves to be there, but he's not Justin Tucker, right? I mean, there's only a few kickers in the league that are going to make a 60-yard field goal in Soldier Field in the middle of the season, right? And Pinheiro's not one of them. It was insane. And so 1% chance, but I would say that you had at least a 5 to 10% chance of extending the drive, even just a pass interference penalty, or, throw something over the middle to Adam Thielen. Like, it was 4th and 10. It wasn't 4th and 20. I mean, we didn't even talk about the 1st and 30.
The 1st and 30 that they converted. Right? That's true. Yeah.
I mean, like, no, it was a gift. And I'm not saying that they would have ended up, tying the game or winning the game or anything, but it was a gift. And again, this is the best chance for the Bears to get a top 2 pick, is for Carolina to keep making these dumb decisions and stacking losses. But this felt like something that, if you didn't know better, you'd say that Frank Reich just did a favor for Chicago. I don't really have another explanation for it.
Yeah, and look, here's what I'll say: Matt Eberflus is not a good coach. This is not a defending of Matt Eberflus, but we saw, and look, I don't agree with what Matt Eberflus did in the Denver game. At the end of that game with the decision, where I wanted to kick the field goal. I certainly didn't want to take the ball out of Justin Fields' hands, so that was a poor choice. Ron Rivera kicking the field goal. I don't remember the exact score towards the end of that game against Washington, when Washington was still in it. Stupid. Josh McDaniels, multiple stupid decisions. Of course, that was the game. You don't get fired for losing to Detroit. You get fired for losing to the Bears. That's the game that got Josh McDaniels fired. Like, there's a lot of bad coaching decisions in the NFL. So while we're stuck with Matt Eberflus, and we certainly aren't happy about it, we have seen, and that has resulted in helping the Bears get wins, a lot of bad coaching decisions from other teams as well.
Do you think he's one and done? Do you think Reich's going to get bounced?
I think so, because I think David Tepper's a little unhinged. I think he's going to just, I think in 6 or 7 years, and I'm not saying he's Daniel Snyder, because that's like a whole other level, but yeah. I think we're going to talk about David Tepper like one of these owners that you probably don't like, because you just never know when he's going to do something that he shouldn't.
And you think Rivera's gone in Washington just for changing,
you would think, right? Yeah, it's not. Yeah, he's gone.
So the Bears have defeated 3 coaches that might not be here next year. One of them for sure isn't, because he's already gone.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's that's what it takes.
If you're going to get fired, the Bears might get you.
We talk about the quarterbacks they beat, being bad quarterbacks. Yeah, apparently they can only beat bad coaches too. So if you have a bad quarterback and a bad coach, here come the Bears, baby.
Right. So, I mean, so the Bears they don't have a chance against the Lions, with Dan Campbell. They don't have a chance against O'Connell. Right. I know Packers fans want to try to bounce Matt LaFleur, but I don't think there's any chance of that. So I'm just kind of thinking of the coaches that are like potentially on the hot seat. I'm not even sure if the Bears have another one that's on the hot seat.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And that was about the first time that when Pinheiro tried it out there that Al Michaels had a little life, because you could just tell he's like, what are they doing? This broadcast, I was going to bring it up and I forgot. Jason Kelce was interviewed for like 45 minutes.
They brought him back.
Yeah. They were talking, they weren't even using him as an analyst for the most part. They were just talking about the Eagles. Like, it was clear. Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit had no interest in broadcasting that football game. Let's just talk to Jason Kelce.
I don't think that Al Michaels has a lot of interest in any Thursday night football game. Like,
he will next week.
He's cashed out. Like,
Baltimore, Cincy, he'll be into that.
Yeah, they're a little more juice there. But like, I mean, his calls have been like big plays, and he makes it sound like he doesn't. I don't know if he's just not seeing the field, or if he's just completely checked out. But he is not doing the best Al Michaels job lately. Like, I like Al, over the years, but this year it's pretty rough. But yeah, a 2-segment interview with Jason Kelce and talking about it was very clear that team had really no interest in and why would you? But no interest in talking about Bears Panthers.
Yeah, very, very true. And not a lot of questions, and plenty of comments today. Not a lot of questions, but Eric Bono wants to know if we should bring in Matt Ariza for a workout here. I'm not saying they're going to get rid of Trenton Gill here. He's got a rookie contract. Trenton Gill's going to be the punter here. It doesn't matter who's here coaching next year. Trenton Gill's going to be the punter for 4 years at least.
Yeah, I mean, the Ariza's the guy that had all the weird legal issues with Buffalo, right? Like that's
it's mostly cleared up, but yeah.
I don't know what that situation's all about. I know he had a big leg.
But yeah, I mean, and here we got cloudy future. So you think the Bears announce Eberflus extension Friday or wait till the end of the season? And here's the thing, and obviously I know cloudy future is joking here, but what I will say, because of what Adam Johns did with his article earlier this week saying he expects Matt Eberflus to be retained. If you are anti Matt Eberflus, which I would think 99% of Bears fans are, although I will be shocked. I was genuinely shocked because I put some stuff out there, so my Twitter mentions were blowing up a lot the last couple of days. There are still Eberflus supporters as Bears fans. I am surprised how many there are. It is a very small minority. I'm not saying it's 50-50. It's probably, I would have thought it'd be like 99%. It's probably about 90%, I would say.
I think that's right.
Yeah. So this game to me, and I don't think we need to get into a ton of specifics with coaching here as we wrap up. There was nothing in this game, despite a victory. They played an awful football team that was missing some of their best players. And I know Khalil Herbert, and there were some guys missing, on our side as Jermaine Edmonds, that our side as well. There was nothing in this game that I look at and go, Matt Eberflus, I understand the defense only gave up, 6 points, whatever. Yeah, 6 points total. I get it. But there's nothing that Matt Eberflus did where I go, all right, he's got things going in the right direction. This was just an ugly football game that the Bears happened to win because they were playing a team that is slightly worse than them, and they were at home.
What did he have up his sleeve?
Right? Yeah, that was like, oh, we're going to see something fun? No.
That's the weirdest comment. I don't understand what the heck was happening there. It's, I'm done with, I didn't really understand the hire for a lot of reasons. I didn't really know him, but it didn't make sense just on paper. And then nothing he's done has swayed me to his side, and quite the opposite. So, unless there's a big change around, actually does something that's pretty interesting down the stretch, I don't see why you'd bring him back. And I don't see why the vast majority of Bears fans would be anything close to excited to see this cycle continue.
Yeah, and we'll just wrap up here with this question comment from Chris Armstrong. We're going to riot, Greg Braggs, shout out, if Flus isn't fired, right? And here's what I'm going to say. And I know George McCaskey is in tune to the fans because I not that fans influence him totally in making a decision, but if Matt Eberflus is back, unless Caleb Williams is there and there's something that Bears fans are excited about, if Matt Eberflus is back, I think this fan base is going to be so disinterested to start the 2024 season. You better get off. If you bring Matt Eberflus back, you better get off to a good start. Because if you start off 1-3 or 1-4, whatever it might be, the fans will be gone. Like the season is lost. You're going to have, like, I was at the Bears Titans game in 2016. It was a Sunday on Thanksgiving weekend. And it was the Matt Barkley game where he brought them back. I think they were down like 20 points in the fourth quarter. He brought them back. They were down 6 points. They had the ball first and goal, and he threw a ball to a wide open Josh Bellamy, who shockingly dropped the football. Bears lose. I was there. In the second half of that game, there couldn't have been 15,000 people in there. It felt like a preseason game. Those type of things have a lasting memory for George McCaskey. I just wonder if this team goes 5-12 this year, if George McCaskey, even if Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles want to keep Matt Eberflus, and I know we have no idea what Kevin Warren thinks about this situation, but I just wonder if George is going to be like, we can't do this. I think it's possible that would happen because he is in tune to having those type of reactions. That's my biggest concern about Matt Eberflus is if he's back, one, I would have no faith in the people above him anymore because they made the decision to retain him. But we joke about it and talk about it. We joke about it, but we're serious when we talk about it's going to be tough to cover this team for a second half of a season when there's just not much going on. We expect Justin Fields to be replaced. So watching that development, while that's what I still look forward to, it a lot less important than that has been. There's not a lot, there's just not much here to watch. I would feel that way on September 1st of 2024 if Matt Eberflus was still the coach.
I'm having a hard time. I've talked about it a couple different ways this week, but the Johns is connected, right? Like, I mean, that he's as connected as anybody there is, and he's willing to put that out there, and he's saying it's his prediction, but it's based on conversations he's had. It's based on some
he's at
real
Hallis all the time
reporting, sure. And so that's as good of a guess as anybody has right now, and I would say maybe he thinks it's 70-30, maybe thinks it's 55-45, whatever, who cares? But like, he's willing to come out and say that it's at least more than 50%, and then he believes he's going to come back. And just from a personal standpoint, like I feel like I've seen this movie before. I feel like I've seen it a couple times. And if you let a lame duck coach pick another quarterback, and then you're just going to fire him the next year anyway, and then have to try to find somebody to come in and work with a new quarterback. Like, I've seen this movie. I don't want to do it again. And I just think that there are other pursuits that I would rather spend my time on.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They will have an opportunity to line everything up the right way, which they never do. And if they just skip that opportunity, it is going to be tough. There's no doubt about it. It's just, you're going to feel just like a lost opportunity before the season even starts. So, all right, we're going to wrap up. Of course, Windy City Gridiron, the Windy City Gridiron podcast channel. Going to have all the podcasts rolling out this week and next week. You'll have Second City Gridiron, of course, all the live shows and the video interviews that I do for Bears Banter. You have them all there. I believe Taylor Dahl has a Making Monsters set to come out tomorrow. I'm not 100% certain, but I believe that's the case. I know she was talking about it earlier this week, so you should be looking forward to that. I assume, JB, you got the full slate next week, right, with your two podcasts?
Absolutely.
And I'll be back with Bears Banter next week. My guest next week is Patrick Maher. You may not have heard of him. He's a host on DraftKings and VSiN. He's a friend of mine. He is a huge Detroit Lions fan. He loves Ben Johnson. we just talked about Matt Eberflus. That is going to be we'll talk about everything with him. That's going to be a big Ben Johnson interview. We're going to talk about his offensive scheme, what he does. And I will say this, he told me, and this guy is a football junkie, college pro. He watches more football than anyone I know. He says Ben Johnson calls. We just talk about how we never have good play callers. Ben Johnson calls the best game he's ever seen.
That's sold.
So
that's it. Sold.
That is my guess next week. So make sure you check that out. So again, Windy City Gridiron and Second City Gridiron for all your podcasts. Make sure you're subscribing. Thanks so much for those of you who have been listening live. For those of you who checked out the podcast on the Windy City Gridiron channel, thank you very much. JB, thanks for hanging out with me. I know we went kind of long there, but had a lot of fun with you. And, again, it was ugly. It was tough to watch at times, but it was the result that everybody wanted. A Bears win and a positive for the number 1 pick or number 2 pick next year.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bill. Appreciate the time.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Bear down. We'll talk to you soon. Adios.